Hi, everyone. I'm sure listeners haven't heard my voice or Elena's voice in a beat. A lot happened this summer that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are aware of, but we're not going to talk about that today. But welcome back to Red Power Hour. We haven't recorded in a couple of months, but I'm Melanie Yazzie. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm joined here by my lovely co-host, Elena, if you want to say hello.
Hello, Sangitamo. This is Elena Ortiz calling in from Ogapoge Owenge, otherwise known as Santa Fe. Good to be back.
I know. I have kind of missed being on the podcast. We totally had plans to record regularly over the summer, but yeah, there are things that shall not be named that happen. There was, of course, but yeah, happy to be back on here, and just gonna get right back into it with our reviews. Elena and I sat down about a week ago trying to decide what kind of movies or TV shows or even books. We're going to do more book reviews, hopefully bring on some really amazing Native women authors onto RPH, just like we did with Ramona Emerson. Ramona Emerson, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Last year, 2 years ago. God, get it together, Melanie.
A while ago. Yeah. Because it was her first book and her second one's already out. So
I know we're really behind. There's just a whole long list of incredible Native women authors we want to bring on. So this is the kind of content you can look forward to here from RPH moving forward. But today, I don't know if have we ever reviewed a Kanaka Maoli story before on RPH, like a movie, a TV show?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I think we've maybe made references on occasion to Hanani K. Trask and Captain Cook, the celebrating the Captain Cook losing
Death Day.
losing his head. uh, on Valentine's Day. But yeah, this is exciting, and I am super happy to see more Kanaka Maoli content out there.
Especially in the language. Of course, like Elena and I are not from Hawaii. Like we're not from the Pacific. We come from a very different geography. So a bit out of my wheelhouse, even though it is part of kind of the larger field of indigenous studies that I work in. But we're going to talk about The Wind and the Reckoning today. This is a film that came out, I believe, in the fall of 2022. So we're about 3 years behind. But Elena is actually the one who suggested this when we were talking last Friday about what to kind of do for our upcoming episodes in the fall into the winter. And so I watched this, and I don't know why I didn't know that this movie existed, but it's both incredible and also like deeply problematic at the same time, like a lot of films about Native indigenous people. So it's a Western, even though it's like Hawaii. I don't know if there's this whole like history of kind of Western style movies in Hawaii, because obviously when we think of Westerns, we think of what the quote unquote American West. But yeah, we can get into that. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about the 2022 film, The Wind and the Reckoning.
Yeah, I was excited to see it. I obviously right now what is really big popular culture is Jason Momoa's Chief of War, which hasn't ended yet. So we've still got some more episodes on that, and we'll be doing an episode on that. But as I was watching it, this movie was popping up, and I thought, well, let's take a look at it. And there are, first off, I want to say, I want to put this out there right away. Please forgive me if I butcher Hawaiian names and language, because it is not a language that's familiar to me, and so I'm going to do the best I can, but I may butcher people's names and places. Forgive me to all of my Kanaka Maoli relatives. I'm going to do my best. But it's a history that I was vaguely familiar with, around Hansen's disease and what they call leprosy. But I never really, I didn't know that much about it. And so to see it on the screen, and then as I was watching it, I'm sure, Mel, you had the same reaction, which was, oh, yeah, this is the same thing. Like, this is just the same thing they did to us. It's just in a really beautiful place with lots of water. So I started like making notes. Oh yeah, that's how they steal the land. And oh, yep, there's the white. And this is, it's a Western. And there's, just like Kevin Costner, there's a couple of white saviors on there that, you just get the guy who directed it as a white guy. And I did a little reading on him. His parents were missionaries. So you've got a little bit of that too, but anyway, I recommend the movie. It was good to see, and it was good. I read some of the reviews, and Kanaka Maoli people seemed to really appreciate it. So that's where we're going.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just FYI for folks listening. So Elena just brought up Chief of War. We were actually going to do a double header podcast recording today and release the Chief of War episode later on, probably this one first and then Chief of War. But we asked our comrade, Ohikeo Maile, to be on, and he was like, I haven't watched that yet. But I feel like we should have a Kanaka Maoli person come on when we do the review of Chief of War. If anyone has recommendations, let us know. Because again, that's out of my wheelhouse, and I am aware that there is like a lot of conversation and chatter online in Kanaka Maoli, online communities right now about Chief of War. And so I don't really want to like just be some like Dene Navajo over here like talking about something that I don't really know what the fuck I'm talking about. So yeah, that'll be upcoming just because it's like, it's just a big deal. It's just a big deal in the zeitgeist right now. But yeah, hopefully that'll be our next episode and we can have a special Kanaka Maoli guest to be in conversation with us about that. So that'll be coming. But yeah, The Wind and the Reckoning, should we maybe give a little bit of a breakdown of what the plot is for the movie? It takes place in 1893, which is the year that the Hawaiian Kingdom was overthrown. It was overthrown, I believe, in January of 1893. So, the preface to the movie before the opening scene is, right, the story of indigenous resistance and rebellion that is basically the plot of the movie, is happening kind of in the aftermath or the immediate aftermath of the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So you're seeing a really aggressive type of U.S. imperialism and colonialism happening in this moment. The main characters, Ko'olau, Ko'olau is the main male character, but he and his family, he has his son Kalei, and the wife Pi'ilani, who's actually the protagonist. She's the narrator, actually. Beautiful narration, beautiful prose. It's a very poetic, almost, film too. The way that you kind of experience this profound moment, like that, how the world is ending for Kanaka Maoli people in this moment, because this is the advent of like the permanence of U.S. occupation of Hawaii and the destruction, of Hawaiian sovereignty. And so you're hearing that, you're like understanding the story through her perspective. And she ends up not having leprosy, but Ko'olau and Kalei have leprosy. And so the premise of the film is, the United States has imported like U.S. cavalry frontmen, people who are like heroes of the Civil War, for example, who are now in Hawaii, and they're charged with the task of hunting down. So there's a lot of hunting that happens, hunting down Kanaka Maoli people who have the disease, taking them to Molokai, where the leper colony is, and that this is part of the strategy of kind of disappearance, the clearing of Kanaka Maoli people from the land, right? So that the U.S. can claim dominion and probably settlement can happen. And so this is kind of what's happening in the larger picture, the kind of the political and the historical context of the film. So there's great upheaval. You don't see a lot of the upheaval because the film is it really only follows like a few characters consistently. The land itself, the mountains and the water is almost its own character in the film. And so you don't see these like these moments of like massacring, or you don't see the overthrow, right? even the notion of like resistance and rebellion is like at a smaller scale. It's more intimate, I would say. It's like an intimate portrait of a handful of mostly Kanaka Maoli people kind of trying to navigate this extraordinary moment of upheaval and destruction in their world, with, you know, the advent of permanent U.S. occupation of Hawaii.
Yeah, and I love that you said that the land is one of the characters. I mean, that's what I found so compelling about it, and so beautifully. It was beautifully done. The cinematography is beautiful, with the land, and the a lot of the actors are Kanaka Maoli. I did not know. So Jason Scott Lee plays Ko'olau, and I thought, oh, so this is the same guy who played Bruce Lee. I thought he was Chinese, but he's Chinese and Kanaka Maoli, so that was good. In Pi'ilani, the film was, or the premise of the film was actually taken from her memoirs. So she wrote down what had happened to her and her family, and it wasn't until that came out actually that they achieved sort of that hero status, because nobody really knew what had happened. Just watching it and just being sort of smacked across the face by this dispossession. They showed what Molokai looked like, what the leper colony was, and mentioned. She mentions in her narration a number of times that it obliterated. So if you were taken from your home and sent to Molokai, you basically ceased to exist. So you no longer had title to your land. You no longer had your marriages were annulled. Basically, it was as if you died. So that level of dispossession is kind of astounding, and that was one of the things that I did not know. I knew about the colony of Molokai, and in contemporary times, it is one of the places in Hawaii that they do not like people coming to visit, and they do not. I mean, tourists, like, they just don't want people to come there, and it's totally understandable. I mean, I think a lot of native communities don't want people to come visit, but particularly there. And at the end of the film, they showed a lot of the burial sites. And, it reminded me, of course, of residential schools.
Exactly.
With the mass burials, the mass grave sites, people being starved, because you got to remember that leprosy or Hansen's disease is very debilitating, and if they're unable to find food for themselves, they're dependent on the keepers, who are all colonizers, for their basic needs, and people starve to death. So it's really a very sad, very brutal thing, and it reminded me so much of boarding school. And Pi'ilani and Kolau and their son don't want to be sent away because she doesn't have leprosy, and the boy, you find out later on, does. And so they're trying to escape. They're trying to get away, and in all of these movies that are done by white people. We've talked about Costner. We've talked about Taylor Sheridan. They try to add nuance, which is almost laughable. Like, there's the good white people, and then there's the bad white people.
Yeah.
And so they have an uncle. I was unclear on exactly how he was their landlord, or he lived.
Yeah, I couldn't figure. He just owned a ranch, from what I could tell. And they worked and lived on his ranch. That was my understanding.
Yeah, that was my understanding too. And so they are trying to get away. He's helping them to get away, and he ends up being fairly central to the sort of the end of the movie. But he's one of the good white people, the good Howleys. And then there are the soldiers, just like, I was just thinking, like Dances with Wolves. There are the bad soldiers, and then there's like one good one. So there's that formulaic. It's very formulaic. in that aspect. But when they run up into the mountains, that to me was like the best part of the whole film, because you see them connect with other Kanaka Maoli people who are in resistance against being moved to Molokai, being removed from their homelands. And that's where you start seeing some humor. That's when you start seeing, characters. I found it interesting that Pi'ilani is supposed to be, to me, it was her memoirs, it was her memories, it was her narration. To me, she was the central character, but she was
I
not
agree.
as well developed as, so, you can tell it was done by
Men.
a man. Yeah, because she should have been the central character. And instead it was Ko'olau, which, that's what men do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So we can talk about gender, we can talk about how it reproduces like all of the conventions of kind of white driven Westerns. Maybe we should start at the language because that's pretty extraordinary. That's probably why a lot of Kanaka Maoli people favorably reviewed this film. Because you said, right, once they, so what happens is the son, Calais, comes back from surfing. This is close to the beginning of the movie. He comes back to their little homestead, the little family of three with Pi'ilani and Kolau, his parents. And he's been surfing with a Howley kid. And they come back to camp, and the dad, Ko'olau, is like making a fire or something. And the kid sees his hand because there you can already see the effects of the leprosy right on his hand because it's been wrapped up. And so the insinuation is the kid like runs off and he's going to go tell, his Howley parents or whatever, that, hey, these Kanaka Maoli people over here, they have leprosy. You need to round them up and remove them to Molokai, to the leper colony. And so this is kind of what begins this whole kind of epic journey you follow them on. And so they have to escape in the middle of the night. And the white rancher uncle, I forgot his name, their landlord, they're the guy that they work for. They end up actually killing. Actually, Ko'olau ends up killing, I think, two deputies or part of like the posse, like this white. They struck me as kind of like just white settlers who were deputized to do this work, and so there's like vigilantes essentially, even though one was wearing like a sheriff's badge. And so they show up, to like take them away. There's this moment where sorry, I was supposed to talk about the language, but there's this moment where they have to inspect the bodies of all these Kanaka, the whole family, and then Pi'ilani has to like disrobe, and they like hypersexualize her. We can talk more about that. But the reason why I'm telling this story is like this is how they end up having to go on the run. It's because in this act of resistance against being rounded up by this posse at their home, and this all takes place, my understanding is on the island of Kauai. They, Ko'olau kills two people in the sheriff's posse, and therefore it becomes like, what's the word?
He's wanted.
He's wanted. He becomes like the most wanted, Indian, essentially, on the island. And so this is why they run into the mountains. And they end up kind of like living in caves. I'm not entirely sure like the time span of the story. I don't know if it was like a matter of days or a matter of weeks or a matter of months that they were able to hold out against being hunted by what later becomes like soldiers and other kind of militia posse people. But it's once they're kind of up in the mountains and away from kind of settlement, you start to hear the language a lot more. And when they encounter some of these other Kanaka Maoli people who are hiding, but engaged in acts of resistance, they also have leprosy. And so they're like refusing to be removed from their homelands. All of it's happening in the language. And I read that the script was written by John Fusco, who actually wrote Thunderheart too. So this guy, John Fusco, assuming he's a white guy, has written a lot of Westerns. Like Westerns are kind of his thing. It's the genre. But yeah, he wrote Thunderheart. So this will be an interesting connection to make. But then they employed a group of language speakers and experts in the language to translate the script into Kanaka Maoli, into the language. Is that how is that the way you call the language? I don't know. I apologize to our Kanaka Maoli listeners, but into the language. And so, yeah, I would say wouldn't you say maybe about like 80% of the film is in the language, in
Yeah.
the Hawaiian language, which is really awesome. It's like beautiful, actually, to hear that, to hear full conversations. What the term haole, what did that term mean? Means someone without a
Oh, yes.
spirit, without a
Somebody
soul, someone
without
who doesn't
breath,
breathe,
or
someone without
somebody who
breath,
doesn't breathe. I
someone who
also think
doesn't
it's
breathe. And
funny
I was like,
that
so accurate.
I think it's funny that Native people, we all know the word for white people in every language. We might not know the language, but I can tell you how to say white person in like 13 different languages.
And it's not kind.
And it's not, most of the time, it's not like Wasichu, which I always loved in
Fat
Lakota.
taker.
Yeah, fat taker. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how to translate all of them, but I do know you can tell when Native people are talking about white people because there's sort of a disgusted disgusted expression on their face, and they say like Pahana or Biligana, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's rightfully so. There's a level of disgust. And it's, it's again, it's because of colonialism.
Yeah,
Like that's literally, it's just the greed and the
and then
violence that it represents.
Kalau does say, like his son, it's Calais who's talking about the Howleys and talking about them in a negative way, and Kalau says to him, this is what it means, and you can become one too. So it's not about the color of your skin; it's about your attitude.
Yep,
And I
how
mean
you
that's not
act.
exactly what he said. The way you act. I thought that was interesting on a couple of levels. One is my immediate reaction is, oh, they put that scene in there because this was all written and directed and produced by white guys. So that was a very my cynical reaction. And then, as the movie
Mine
went
too.
on, I thought, well, because, it's a movie about dispossession. It's a movie about diaspora. It's a movie about, settler colonialism and genocide. And they're soft pedaling it by saying, oh, it's not all white people who are bad as they're stealing their land. Like it doesn't matter that the white guy, the uncle, is defending them necessarily. It doesn't mean that the soldier who had been there for a while and who ultimately defended Go'olau, it doesn't matter, that they were the good white people. They're still there to steal their land, overthrow their government, and basically, commit genocide. It's what white people do when they're telling these stories to soft pedal their own presence that I find to be, at the very best amusing, at the very worst kind of like, yeah, disgusting, like, yeah, howly.
Well, what I said earlier, right? There's like you get the captions. There's like two before the movie opens, like telling you like it's 1893, like the Hawaiian Kingdom has just been overthrown, but you don't see any of that. Like there's no evidence of like what's happening on a bigger scale. And in the entire film, you're just following like a few people basically out on the land, running and hunting and resisting and things like that. And that might also just be like what you're saying. That might be even a subconscious way in which these kind of white settler directors are keeping, the genocide and like the dispossession and the occupation at bay. It's like in the background. It's not even a specter, I would say. It's almost non-existent, except for like, oh, we need to acknowledge that this happened in 1893 because it's based on the 1906 written account of Pi'ilani, who's talking about this, right? I bet I haven't read that account. I'd be very interested in reading it because I bet you she is very direct in that account about like precisely what is happening in that moment. But the way that the film is structured, it's like I said, it's in the background, but it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so there's a little bit of kind of like, I feel it's kind of like morally ambivalent, the film is about like what's actually happening. It's like, yeah, these people have leprosy and they're like being hunted by these Indian killers in the context of Hawaii. And this is happening. 1893 is like allotment, post allotment in the quote unquote mainland US, the continental US. And so like the dispossession is like off the fucking charts in this moment, in the history of US expansion and imperial consolidation and Indian killing. And so you're supposed to kind of like infer these things as the larger context of the movie, but there aren't direct references except for like when the Kanaka Maoli people are talking about engaging in actual resistance. Ko'olau is told once he encounters people that he knows, these other Kanaka Maoli people, once they're on the run up in the mountains on the cliffs. What were they calling him? He was like a hero, like for basically killing his own people. Like word had spread quickly that he had killed these two Haole vigilantes, essentially, who were trying to round up and remove Kanaka Maoli people. And so he was like a hero to his people, for this profound act of resistance. And so you're like, okay, so there are moments where you're understanding what's happening, maybe from some of the Kanaka Maoli relatives. And then like the major what's his name? The McCabe? Is that the guy, McCabe, the US cavalry person who's just like super racist and disgusting and just really loves killing not just Indians, but everyone apparently. And so he like represents this kind of like, he's like the supreme Haole, of the movie. He kind of is like that hyper masculine settler figure that sort of personifies dispossession and settler colonialism, just like the sheer violence of it in that particular historical moment. But even that is like, it's alluded to through like these characters and the way that they conduct themselves. There's literally no historical context. There's no historical context to the film. There are no references to what's happening except for, Governor Dole, of the Dole, like banana empire or pineapple empire, for example. So you're kind of connecting, having to connect the dots yourself, especially if you don't know much about Hawaiian history. And again, that kind of sanitizes it. That makes it easier to just, this is a story. How sad that these people had to resist in this way. Anyway.
It's a story that has so little character development. And like, they're just caricatures is what they are. There's Uncle, who's the good white father figure, settler father figure. And then there's McCabe, who's the evil army guy. And then there's the I don't know, I was referring to him as the scout, the guy who is more, more empathetic to the Kanaka Maoli.
Marshall, I think was his name.
Yeah, I think that's right. When you look at Kolau and Pilani, like the only and Calais, okay, gonna butcher that. The son.
Sorry. Calais.
The only thing you see about this family is trauma. Like you don't ever get a sense of them before, like like you were saying, the first scene is when the little boy comes running up, and the little Howley boy is behind him, and they see the leprosy. They see the hands and the skin, and he goes running off, and right then and there that that's pretty much the end for that little family. But you never see the family without it being in a trauma situation. So immediately when the little blonde kid goes running off, there's going to be a problem. They have to get together and run. They have to run. And then from then on, it's all around trauma and the trauma that's being inflicted on them by the settlers. So there's no moments, like there are a few moments with the father and son that you get a sense of the relationship. But really Piilani and Kolau are arguing all the time because she's saying, you can't leave because we're married. I don't want to lose my family. And he's saying, I'm paraphrasing this, I'm trying to save your life. But it's all about trauma. And that's a thing that white directors, white producers, white writers always want to focus on, is indigenous trauma. Like, there are no stories unless it's something about trauma. And so that's where this movie was the same as so many other films that we've seen and reviewed, which is, that it's all based on trauma. And I think I would love to see a film by Kanaka Maoli about what life was like before settler colonialism. And, something, or even contemporary, like, I'm comparing it to Reservation Dogs in my brain, like something that really shows the beauty and strength of the culture and is not centered on trauma. Like that, those are the things that I would like to see. And we don't see those. I love the fact that they were using the language. I love the fact that this story is out there and that people can see it and understand it, because I think 99.9% of the Americans, especially American tourists who go to Hawaii, don't know this story. No, I was going to say, they just go out there to drink pina colada. I don't know if they drink pina coladas, but drink pina coladas and sit on the beach. And they have no idea that, that this happened, that the kingdom of Hawaii was overthrown by a group of businessmen.
And then became like the governors and the political elite.
Yeah. And that they had this basically a reservation of sick people that they simply moved over. Now, there was a cure for Hansen's disease, but they weren't going to give it to them because they wanted them to be removed from their land so that they could steal their land. And people don't know this, and everyone thinks of Hawaii as the place to go. Oh, beautiful beaches. And I'm sure it's beautiful. I've not been there. Beautiful beaches, beautiful mountains. And you can see that in this film, but you're not getting the fact that what it has become because of colonization and because of dispossession and because of the overthrowing of the kingdom of Hawaii is this settler's wet dream. And, it's really kind of gross to, and it's gross, and it's also insulting to Kanaka Maoli's to not have these stories out there and to not have them told. And in truthfully, realistically, honestly.
I don't even think most people realize that Hawaii was illegally annexed, according to international law, by the United States. It is quite literally, it's like, I'm pretty sure by legal definition, it is occupied. It really doesn't belong to the fucking United States. Like, it just doesn't. Like, Hawaii should be independent, period. And it is militarily occupied in addition to being settled in that type of occupation by the US, also by, settlers from other places in the world. But it is, and so 1893 is this like incredibly important year. And so this important, like a pivotal moment in that history and that long history of exploitation and theft. And so I would have appreciated it be that be explained, not just like in a caption at the beginning of a movie, but that the movie's like about that, from a Kanaka Maoli perspective. Because again, people just don't know anything. And even I have like very, novice understanding because I'm not Kanaka Maoli. But, I was, we read this article. I'm teaching a class on indigenous feminisms this semester. And so I was doing a reading tutorial with my students yesterday, and I had them read this op-ed about the resistance against the 30-meter telescope from 6 years ago up on Mauna Kea, when folks were engaged in beautiful resistance right against the construction of the TMT. And I was watching videos. This is stuff that was going on even a decade ago when we were really beginning the Red Nation. And so like this was part of that constellation of really incredible, almost like direct action land-based struggle that was happening at that time. The blockades on Mauna Kea, the blockades against copper mining on Oak Flat, and then Standing Rock was happening. There's a lot happening in that particular decade. And I was watching videos, and these are people, contemporary people. This is 5-10 years ago. And it had such a different feeling to it than The Wind and the Reckoning. And I was kind of comparing them in my mind. And I was like, why there's no reason why this film that's happening in this pivotal year, that's in the language, right? That is supposedly supposed to be centering Kanaka Maoli people. Why wouldn't it feel more like, like the footage that I was watching, that had been recorded of Kanaka Maoli people praying or chanting or just like throwing down to protect their mountain, to protect Mauna Kea. You get what I'm saying? And so it's like, it felt there's such like it was beautiful to hear the language. And yes, I'm aware it's a film of historical fiction, but it just lacked the heart that I would like to see, or that I know to be true, that not just Kanaka Maoli people have, but all indigenous people have. It truly, it felt very howly. It felt like a film without breath. It felt like a film without life. Like you said, the characters were very one-dimensional. And so, yeah, like this, and it's based on a memoir by this, what seems like a very remarkable Kanaka Maoli woman. And so how do you take something like that and then you deaden it and flatten it, and through a white male writer who's written a lot of Westerns, and then you put it, and then you like input that into the language. And like, what if the language were the thing that we're supposed to have driven the film? It probably would have been completely different, because I don't know much about, the Hawaiian language, but I bet you it's extremely complex and descriptive and illustrative. And like, imagine if the film had actually been done through like a Kanaka Maoli worldview, is what I'm saying. Damn, it would have been a very different, it would have felt alive. It would have felt powerful, especially if you're talking about this particular moment that is so pivotal in that history of resistance and resilience the Kanaka Maoli people carry through to today. And that was not present at all. This film, like, at all, even though it was about resistance.
Well, and we talk a lot about the gaze. Like, when you're looking at a film, whose gaze, whose eyes are you seeing through? And it's really easy to tell in this film, you're seeing this through a white man's settler gaze. And you brought up that when they had to strip them, when they first came to their home, the vigilantes came to their home early on in the film, and they had to strip to see, where and who had leprosy. And of course, they stripped Pi'ilani, who's this beautiful, I forget who played her, but she's a beautiful woman. And you can see as she's taking off her clothes, and then it cuts to the face of the men. And they're these old grubby white guy, howly guys. And you can see from the look on their face. And it's really gross. And it was like, I just did a big ick at that point. But this film is totally from a white male gaze. And, you have that moment where Pi'ilani is standing there, and her persona, she is strong. She is dignified. She is not going to give in and try to cover herself, with her hands. She's standing there like a proud Kanaka Maoli woman. And I wanted to see from her eyes what she saw. I didn't care about what they saw. And they really missed an opportunity to make something of her character, because she is the voice, and she was the voice over. But then when you see her and her interpersonal communications with her husband, her son, and then the other people, you lose all that. She becomes less than.
Mm-hmm.
And I, that's squarely on the shoulders of the the director, the writer, who are white men, and you know the director David Cunningham, being the child of Seventh Day Adventist missionaries. So these are people who feel that they are God's gift to everyone, and that if they can move around the world and convert everyone to this bizarre religious Christian sect, that they will have, you know, earned their place into heaven or whatever. But it's a very supremacist point of view. I mean, that particular sect of Christianity is very supremacist. It's very,
Mm.
it's more ick. And I can see, I didn't know that when I watched the film. It wasn't until afterwards that I thought, I got to look up this guy who directed. I got to see, you know, what his story is. And when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, I get that now. I get that through the whole film. You get this entitlement, like we're entitled to be here, and we're entitled to this land because we are converting you, and now you are no longer savages. Now you are, you know, Christians, and it's just a big ick. And that was the feeling I got throughout the movie, even with there, you know, there were good things about this film, and I liked the Kanaka Maoli characters, and I liked the language, and I loved the character of the land. But it also kind of gave me a big ick.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a morally ambivalent film, which all of these Westerns, essentially, that are made by white settler men, they're always morally ambivalent. I wouldn't say it's like a two sides kind of movie at all, because there are those as well. Or there are just like the more standard Westerns from the earlier part of the 20th century that are just like openly racist, right? And hypermasculine. I wouldn't necessarily say this is. There, I felt like it did cast a certain kind of judgment on, you know, like the white men who were pursuing, well, only some of them. Kind of this US cavalry guy, what was his name? McCabe, who's like pursuing Ko'olau and the rest of the Kanaka Maoli people who are hiding from capture. And I would say that not the director, but maybe the writing by this same guy, John Fusco, who wrote Thunderheart. Because when we reviewed Thunderheart, we're like, this movie actually had what I thought was like a pretty profoundly sympathetic view of the American Indian movement, like Thunderheart did, right? Like you could tell John Fusco was like on the side of Lakota people in resistance against US colonialism and repression and state violence. And that was kind of present here, but in a much less direct way. I do feel like there was a sympathy for indigenous resistance, for sure, in the way that this movie was written. So there was like some judgment on what's happening with like these protagonists of settler colonialism kind of on the front lines, the frontier, because they're basically on the frontier at this point, right? Because like the Hawaiian kingdom has just been overthrown, and we're encountering like a very prototypical frontier narrative of a Western in this movie. And so you have the foot soldiers of colonialism, literally foot soldiers. I believe there's like a Chinese laborer who also gets murdered. I believe he was Chinese, but he's also treated with incredible racism by the US Army, but then also like the sheriffs and then the vigilante posse people who are all working together to hunt down Ko'olau, who's, you know, become the most wanted person in Hawaii, and, you know, his band of like Kanaka Maoli resistors. Uh, and they end up just killing him for assisting. He engages in an act of like solidarity with the son, to help the son evade capture by McCabe and his band of violent white settler men, the posse, and then he dies for it. And he tells, you know, Calais, when they have a conversation at one point, um, you know, I'm not doing this because I want to. He's like, I have a family and I need to, you know, help feed them. He's like, they treat me like shit. You know, they don't even see me as human either, right? And you do see some moments of interaction between like the Howley people, and this, I forgot his name, the Chinese character, the laborer. He doesn't live for very long in the film, but so you're seeing some other dynamics of like racialization and imperialism at play, like very vaguely, like these snapshots of it. Um, which I feel like you also see in westerns, in other westerns that I've watched. But the overarching kind of like arc is it's a very formulaic western, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Um, Even the fact that they were like hiding in the mountains and living in caves, I was like, wait, is this like the story of Geronimo? Like truly. I'm like, you could just seriously like, I know this is taking place in Kauai, but this could literally just be like Apache territory. Like you could like, yeah, you could just switch out Ko'olau for like Geronimo and it would be the exact same fucking story. Um, and I feel like we've talked a lot about this kind of like Geronimo being like the original terrorist or the original like public enemy number one of US imperialism. You know, this also harkens back to like Osama bin Laden being called Geronimo and hiding in caves, you know, to evade capture by the US Army, the US cavalry of the 21st century during the US War on Terror, right? Um, and so there's this like the specter, right? There's this specter of usually like an indigenous or like a savage man, you know, who's on the run for committing acts of like profound violence against like, you know, the sanctity of like the United States and the right and so then there's this kind of like there always has to be this protagonist, this threat that then reinforces like US the coherence of US national identity. And so I felt like that was also, I don't even know if these white directors were meaning for this to happen, but that's also just happens all the time in Westerns. You just have like the Indian bad guy, basically the native bad guy. Um, and this is also how like usually the white men who are hunting the Indian bad guy, they kind of like reinforce and shore up their white settler masculinity. Because to be on the frontier means to be like tough, you know, means to be tough, means to be rugged. This is where that kind of American value of the rugged individual comes from. It comes from these moments. Like this is where like all of these reality shows about fucking living in mud huts in
Naked
Alaska,
and afraid.
naked and afraid come from too. Like the whole homesteading movement that's really popular right now too. Like these are all just people who are just like remaking the frontier over and over and over and over again because apparently that's the only place where you can find yourself as a white
Yeah,
American. So that's happening in
it's
this movie too.
it's regeneration by violence, and
Oh yeah, there you go.
it's that's exactly. I mean, that's the old trope, regeneration through violence, how the West
Yep.
was won. And
Yep.
it's reinventing hypermasculinity through conquering the insert whatever, Hawaii, the West, you know, the Amazon, Mexico, what, just insert wherever it is that white Western men, you know, particularly we're talking about the Judeo-Christian Western European settlers, and it's all about regeneration through violence and establishing these hyper masculine societies that everything that's not cis hetero white man is less than or below, and that goes, that's racialization, but it's also gender, and it's so common. You can see this in every film like this, and it's just sad that Pi'ilani's character was not more fleshed out, and we didn't get to really see how extraordinary she was, that she wrote this memoir after burying her husband and her son, and how they lived and survived for so long without having to be captured and sent away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of biopics. I think they're very poorly done most of the time and like boring for some reason. Anyway, but what if this had been like a biopic of Pi'ilani from a Kanaka Maoli worldview perspective? You know, still based on her memoir. They show photos of her at the end of the film. Like, I don't know. What if you had found like, oh, she might have not had descendants because her son passed away. But what if you had found like her relatives, you know, people who are alive today? I don't know. It would have been like living, because that's like the anti-Howley, you know, like that's the opposite of Howley. Like the
But
Howley is
also,
like
we don't
dead.
know if she had other kids. I mean, because
That's true.
her, I mean, she possibly could have after her husband died, because she did not have leprosy. She would have been able
Oh yeah,
to
you're right.
to
She could have had another family.
so I mean, we don't know if she had. They That's something that would have been nice to hear in this film. Like, it was based on her memoirs, but like we saw what happened to her only in as far as her, her husband and her son were concerned. We don't see what happened to her later on in her life, and how she lived and where she lived and what she did, because clearly she was a woman of great power and determination. So what did she do with the rest of her life?
And, she's the voiceover, she's the narrator for the film. If those words that the fictional character Pilani was speaking were in fact just directly from her memoir, holy shit, she was a very good writer. Like the things that she was saying about her love for the land, how she even like the way that she was just characterizing and describing the land, like what it means to be, what Hawaii means, like what it means to be who she is, was incredibly powerful. It was
Yeah.
poetic, it was powerful, it was profoundly political. And those were actually the voiceover moments when she was talking about, and then they would have the cinematography when they would pan out over the ocean, coming off of a cliff and panning out over the ocean. Those were actually my favorite moments, I think, of the movie, because I felt, I think it's really just because it was from a Kanaka Maoli perspective, frankly. Like I felt
Yeah.
like those were moments where we were not being mediated, that were not being mediated by the director, the white male director, the white male writer. And yeah, I like, what if more of the film had just been about that or from that perspective? It would have been beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny, you were talking about, like, it could have been Geronimo hiding in the caves. It could have been like any number of indigenous native communities that are forced off their land and forced to flee and hide from genocide. And I think the white perspective on that, the Howley perspective on that is, oh, they're like rats crawling into holes. And I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but when they found Saddam Hussein, he was, and actually
Mm,
uh, Muammar Gaddafi as well,
you're
and
right.
to me, yeah, and to me, like, as a native person, as an indigenous person, and I think about how we as Pueblo people feel about caves. Um, to me, that's like returning to the womb of Mother Earth. So it would be a natural place for a native person to hide and plan their resistance. But I think too, it has a very different feel when it's from the white gaze. And I think those caves are lava tubes
Mm,
in Hawaii. And I just thought, of course, these people are there. Number one, they know where they are. They know where they lead and where they come out, and that's how they're able to plan their resistance. But to me, it was like they're back with Mother Earth, and that made perfect sense to me. But you're right, like that from a white perspective, it that's Geronimo.
yeah, I'm even thinking about like the Viet Cong, engaged in anti-imperialist struggle. They made tunnels, underground tunnels, which I mean, another word for that might be caves. But yeah, I mean, literally, we think about prehistory. The notion of a human living or even inhabiting a cave, it's just like a caveman, right? This is a person who is pre-literate, like pre-linguistic. These are, people who are closer to quote unquote monkeys. I put quote unquote monkeys. It's funny. I put scare quotes around monkeys because monkeys are incredible. That's why I just
Yeah,
did that. But these are living Homo sapiens that are closer to monkeys than they are to like the human beings we know today, i.e., civilization, because the frontier is also that fucking line between civilization and savagery. And so if you're in a cave, then you're a savage. And again, you just see that reproduced over and over and over again within the US imperialist imaginary. And so this is definitely something that's being reproduced. And it's like, I don't know, man, like what's the word? When you're just seeing, it's like Groundhog Day. Watching this was kind of like Groundhog Day, where I'm like, are we watching this again? I know that this is a frontier. I know that this is a Western. Like, I know. But unless you're going to be really explicit about telling a story about like US imperialism and the frontier, which I don't think that this movie was, I don't think it was intentionally doing that. I think these were just like like a dude who writes Westerns. And this is just like what he thinks is a Western in his mind. Unless you're going to like intentionally politicize that and critique it and be very obvious about it, just stop. Just stop making frontier movies. Seriously, stop making frontier movies because you will never be able to get out of the traps, like the colonial and the racial trappings, if you continue to make a frontier movie. Like, especially when it comes to the quote unquote savage figures or characters in that film or in that story. So, wah wah.
They don't want no more stinking cowboys.
Seriously.
Get your stinking cowboys off our land. We don't want you no more.
I think white dudes just need to stop making Westerns.
I absolutely do. They need to stop being
Stop.
cowboys and stop making westerns, and because it does not make them look good. Honestly, it just doesn't. Like, it's not looking good on you all. And let the Kanaka Maoli tell their own stories. Like, seriously, I
Like,
mean,
seriously.
yeah,
Shut the fuck up. No one cares about your
yeah,
interpretation of Kanaka Maoli history.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, seriously. This goes pretty much for all Indigenous folks. You know what this makes me want to do? There are two things, whenever I have time in another fucking lifetime. But I would love, even though I have no experience writing scripts, I would love to write like an Indigenous, like a very aware, like a very meta Indigenous Western and like an Indigenous romantic comedy. Those are two things I would love to do because those two genres are so fucked up. One is like the romantic comedy is just like very heteronormative, very, very white, has really rarely deviated from that formula. And of course, Westerns are just also extremely heteropatriarchal and very white and very colonial. And wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know if you could like redeem like either of those genres or particularly Westerns, but I don't know. I would just love to see something like that.
I think that would be fabulous. I mean, that would be insane. Like, think of just like literally inverting all of those,
Yes. It's like the
and
anti-Western.
yeah, anti-Western, invert and have the native characters be complex and no hyper masculinity, no male gaze. Throw in a lot of humor. Throw in honest to goodness love stories, true, friendships, um, and then show the ridiculousness of the white settlers, and you know and how badly they how I don't even know how to say this, but how they did not get the land. Like, it's from the very beginnings, and I'm talking from the Southwest because that's where I am. But like the fucking Spanish got here and would have starved to death without the Pueblo people because they didn't know how to farm this land. They didn't know what they could eat. They didn't know what they couldn't eat. And of course, Native people helped them so they didn't starve to death. It was the same thing on the East Coast. But to show the utter ridiculousness of going in and conquering a land and a people that you knew nothing about, that you were unable to survive without, I think would be amazing. But whether or not we could write it, but could we ever get it funded? That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially in this like political climate. Yeah, I don't know. That would be a journey.
And then we could
Might
put
have to be.
native actors in whiteface.
I would take some serious poetic license with something like that too. I'm like, this was not historically accurate, but also, I think the politics, like the politics and the story are really
Yeah.
important. White dudes get to do that shit all the time. They win Academy
Yeah.
Awards for it. Like, why can't
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
that? I don't know how to do that, but this is one of my side
They don't
projects.
either.
My mini side. You're right. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's why they keep making these dumb movies. Like,
Yeah. I mean, come on, this is the industry that put Ricardo Montalban as Dull Knife. I mean, seriously. And they had them traipsing across Nebraska, but they never left Monument Valley. I mean, come on. We could do this.
yeah, you know what? The standard is low. Like, what is that saying? Like,
The bar is
give me
low.
give me the strength of a mediocre white man, and give me the courage of
Yeah.
a mediocre white man.
Yep. Yeah. Give us the skills of a mediocre white man, and we'll do a blockbuster. Yeah. I mean, all we have to do is write. Notice how I'm insinuating myself into this project, but all we
Do
have to
it.
do is write it. And there's lots of Native people, thankfully, these days who are in the film industry and in the the producing, directing, that could do it. All we have to do is write it and retain creative control, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and then just have like a strong female protagonist, or heaven
Yep.
forbid, like a two-spirit protagonist.
Yep.
Like,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
That'd be cool.
I feel like Prey might be a movie that has kind of done some of that. Prey kind of turned the
Yeah.
Western, the alien Western, a little on its head.
Yeah.
There might be some that are doing some interesting shit in that regard, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, you heard it here first. I'll
That's right.
put that on
And
my list of things to do.
if anyone wants to help fund it, so we'll take donations for just earmark them for Melanie and Elena's blockbuster film TBD.
The anti-Western.
Yeah,
Melanie and
Western.
Elena's blockbuster anti-Western. Because we sit here on RPH and we just like critique the things other people make. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Sometimes the critic has to become the creator. I'm an
Yeah.
artist. You and I both have background in art, just because that isn't necessarily what we do.
Well, I mean,
to make a living.
I was a writer. I mean, that's what I do. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think we can do it. We just need funding.
I'm a visual artist. I don't talk much about it, but
yes, you are, and you're good. And honestly, we just need someone to pay us lots of money to do it so that we can quit our day jobs.
Yes. Running nonprofits and working in academia. Like, yeah, that'd be dope.
Yeah.
Or like if we could assemble a team of really incredible, just brilliant Native women to write something together. Yeah, that would be so satisfying.
That would be.
That's a dream.
Yeah. And they're out there. I mean, they really are.
They are. And an intergenerational team, that'd be super dope.
Yep.
But yeah, this is why we do this on RPH. At least this is why I do this. Like, this is why I watch a lot of movies and TV. It's because stories are so important. I love listening to good stories. I love telling stories. I really love visual narrative, probably more so than other types of narrative. And yeah, it's something that I've always had a passion for, but I've just, never had the frickin' time to pursue.
Yep.
It would basically be an entire new career. You can't really do this on the side. I don't have time to do this on the side of everything else I'm doing, but
no. But I
But
think
yeah,
I think it's important, and we've talked a lot about the fact that it is up to us to, as Native people, but as Native women also, to carry on the stories. Like that's how we're going to
hmm
survive, is by carrying on the stories, and the way we tell them may be different now than the way our ancestors told them, but they're our stories nonetheless. And it is important to tell them. It's important to tell them right. And white men are never going to do it. So
no,
it's always going to be up to us.
yeah. If you continue to seed that ground, you're like seeding power to
Yep.
those people to continue to fuck it up,
Yep.
and to continue to just reproduce, to regenerate through violence. Whether it's
Yep.
like the depiction of violence against women, like we saw in the Martin Scorsese version of Killers of the Flower Moon, or rhetorical violence, symbolic violence. So,
Yep.
and the realm of cultural production is it's a field of struggle if ever I saw one
It's
in
true.
this moment in American history right now. So
Yep.
it is a battleground for sure, and I have no intention or interest in ceding that territory, letting that get
Nope.
dispossessed. It's like shit. You're even
Nope.
trying to dispossess us of our stories. Like fuck you. Like, that's
Yeah.
not like I'm not gonna let that happen. You know.
No.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Elizabeth Cookland. I wrote my master's thesis. I think this was the title. Of course, it was just my title was something that she said because I'm terrible at titles. Someone else would have to title this film, by the way. I'm fucking terrible at titles. So I invite people to give us recommendations. But she wrote that, the purpose of American Indian intellectual endeavor is to keep the plot moving. This is literally what she says. You keep the plot moving. She's like, it's not about working out your identity. It's not even necessarily about understanding the inner workings of colonialism or imperialism. Like the primary function of being an indigenous intellectual is to keep the plot moving, i.e., like you keep telling, she called it the tribal story. And she conceptualized nationhood as like this important aspect of the tribal story. She's like, nationhood is the expression of the tribal story. And that is one that is like rooted in a continued relationship with land, like an understanding of who you are as a distinct people on a land base, with a particular relationship with that land. And so, yeah, she's like, you have to keep the plot of the tribal story moving. That is your most important job. And in many ways, that's your only job. And so that's always stuck with me. That's pretty much what we've always tried to do with the Red Nation.
Yeah.
Even though like you engage in political debates and you become a leftist and these things like that, it really, at its heart, that's why we're called the Red Nation.
Yeah.
We're the humble people of the earth. We're just here to keep the story of our nations moving forward.
Yep. That sounds like a good place to end.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. It was nice to be back. It was just like
Yeah.
at a movie with Elena. Like, I haven't done this
Well,
in a
I
while.
was like, this was a really short movie. This will be a really short podcast, but once
No,
we get going,
we always
I know,
talk for at least an hour.
I
15
know, I
minutes.
know.
No, I told my new students, I was like, I want to hear mostly from you because it's like an upper level kind of seminar, undergraduate seminar. And I was like, I could certainly talk to you. I could talk. I'm like, I can talk. Like, I could talk to you for an hour and a half of this class, but I'm not going to. I'm like, trust me, I have a podcast where with my co-host, we just talk like a lot for a long time.
Just freestyle, man.
You just freestyle. Um, but this is a shorter one. We're at an hour and 11 minutes. That is short for us. We have been
It
known to
is,
go
but
on for 2 hours about
you
stuff.
just gotta go
So
pick some of that wild rice, man.
yeah, I'm gonna go wild rice harvesting. I'm actually heading up right after this. I gotta pack all my camping gear in my car, but just really extremely honored and grateful to be invited up to some Ojibwe lands up north in Minnesota Makoche to do that.
That's gonna be great.
I've been really wanting to be out on the land, out of the city, I only wanted to do that in indigenous spaces. And of course, I would never do that without an invitation, an explicit invitation.
Yes.
So I lived here for 3 years and I've been waiting. The time has finally come. So that's what I'm going to go do this weekend. Not trying to
Good.
romanticize it because it sounds like a lot of work too. But yeah, I'm really excited.
But land and water and rice, wild rice, sounds
The
good to me.
trees,
Yeah.
woods. Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of my element completely, but also the water. Oh my gosh, the water here is just it's incredible. Like I've never lived anywhere like this and um every day I'm just astonished that I can literally just go it's like not too far from my house and walk around a beautiful natural lake. Like I
Yeah.
can just do that. And I do
Yep.
that. And yeah, the Rio Grande is like dry right now. There's no body of water to like go to in New Mexico, So it's a different vibe up here for sure. And again, I'm just every day I pinch myself and I kind of marvel at the fact that I can do that. Yeah.
And it's, I'm the same way. I travel every now and then, and my favorite place to go is Scotland. And people say, "Why are you going to Scotland? You've been there 2 or 3 times." Because of the water. Because you can walk out the door of like literally any building anywhere in the Highlands and see water. It could be a lake, it could be the ocean, it could be just a random waterfall coming off a mountain. And like I stand there going, wow,
I
there's
know.
water coming out of that mountain. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing. And
Uh-huh.
people say, yeah, why are you looking at like, what's that waterfall called? We don't have a name for it. I'm sure somebody did way back in the day, had a name for that waterfall. But water and very, very tall trees are my jam when I'm
Me
not home.
too. It's cuz we're from the Southwest. It's cuz we ain't got water, we ain't got tall trees. Like Northern California is the same way for me, redwoods, going to the ocean. Altiora was the same way, particularly the South Island. Like yeah, I those places are just completely magical to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am
Yeah.
awestruck in those kinds of places.
And I don't want to move. I don't want to, this is
No.
my home. This is where my people are. But I love to visit the trees and just like check in and how are y'all doing? Great
Yeah.
big giant ancestors. And yeah,
I don't know if there's like giant tree ancestors here. It's mostly just woods, but it's the trees
yeah.
here are still beautiful and they're turning because it's fall already. And so I don't know, being amongst the
Yeah.
trees and on the water sounds like a beautiful
House
weekend
Mountain's
to
got
me.
snow, so we're
Damn,
going
really?
into it. Yeah, not
Wow,
much
it's
adjusting,
happening.
but
Oh,
it is
wow.
happening.
Okay. It's
It
gonna
is.
be a winter.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Well,
Well, I hope you have a fabulous time out there.
thanks. I'll let you know how it goes. I'm really excited. Okay. Thanks everyone for
And stay
listening.
tuned
We'll be back
for,
hopefully
yep,
with Chief of War next with
yep.
a special Kanaka Maoli guest who can actually talk about things with more expertise and pronounce things correctly that Elena and I could not do this time around. But until next
Butcher the
time, everyone,
names.
thanks.
And, yeah,
Sorry.
perfect.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Until next time, everyone. Thanks for listening.